right, numbers are rising. Good evening, everybody. We're just waiting for everybody to get in, and then we will get this show started. But thank you all so much for joining us today. All right, looks like they're in. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Welcome to Accept Webinar 3. We're going to talk about life in the office and how you work the ABCs of being a POC in the office with people. So we'll do some quick introductions for those of you who might not have joined us before. But I'm Darryl Jones, Senior Associate Director of Admissions with several other titles at Gettysburg College. Derek?
Oop, gotta get my unmute. Always the worst. Hi, I'm Derek Brinkley. I am the Assistant Vice President of Undergraduate Admissions at Columbia College, Chicago, in Chicago, Illinois. I'll pick Ralph. Go on, Ralph.
All right. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Ralph Figueroa. I'm a Dean of College Guidance at Albuquerque Academy in New Mexico. My 19th year here on the high school side, but I spent 10 years on the college side before this, Occidental College in Los Angeles and Wesleyan University in Connecticut. Thanks.
So everybody, what we're gonna do.
Oh, you're not gonna let me introduce myself?
You're the star, so I'm getting ready to.
So is it like that?
The next person you're about to hear from is the star of stars.
No, it's not.
Get him, T.
All right, hello, I'm Tamara Siler, and I am Deputy Director of Admission with a specialty in Access and Inclusion at Rice University. So welcome. We have a lot to talk about, so I'm gonna leave it at that. Why did you unshare your screen?
Oops. What?
Did
Hold
you kick
on.
yourself out?
I've got too many buttons going here, and now. Are we sharing now?
Nope.
Not yet.
Here we go.
There you go.
There we go.
So here's
Yes.
people. We're gonna get real about how you get the job. So if you're thinking about a transition, we're gonna talk to you about that. We're going to talk to you about things dealing with having the job. And then we're going to talk about how you find your joy in this world. So Tamara, how about if you kick it off with the idea of getting the job and how people can actually know their worth. And everybody, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we will answer them as they come in. But again, thank you for joining us. Tamara?
Yes, and certainly also if you don't have questions, but you have something to share as we are going through this, you can also utilize the chat section. So I think when we were sort of talking about this, I think it's very easy for any of us who are people of color to get trapped into just doing the DEI work. Now that I want to say that maybe trapped is not the right word, because I think the work is great work and I've done it. I mean, I gladly embrace my access and inclusion title. And I know what I bring to that work. I know what lenses I bring to it. I know the awareness that I bring to it. As we've been rebranding our website, I realize the role that I play in the visual that I have and the input that I have in terms of making sure that whatever we put up on that screen, you know, people can see themselves in that narrative. So, but I think, you know, I wouldn't be here 27 years later if that was the extent of how I was able to challenge myself. And I think, you know, whether you're applying to a DEI job or not, you have to think about yourself in terms of if you want to do more than that. And again, if that's your focus and that's your passion and that drives you, then feel free to dig on in and hang on to it. But if you really want to know more about the profession, and I believe that it's actually feeding your DEI work to know more about the profession, you just realize that you're more than that. So even when you're applying for a job that may have a description that is specifically DEI, you should be thinking about ways in your cover letter, in your resume, and all of that to highlight, what else you bring to this position. So I think, because none of us, I don't think, get to do just this, the outreach work. I mean, there are basic things that are admission type of responsibilities that everyone has to do. But I think that if you really want to grow, and even if you are in that DEI area, you need to grow to be able to best benefit your kids. I think it starts from the beginning. You have to figure out, like, how do you market yourself so that they see you in a multitude of spaces. And you have to realize that given this industry, most likely the person screening your application is not going to be a person of color. And even if you're applying to a position that's not DEI, I think there's this tendency of people to see you in that role. So I think that's sort of the flip side. If you're not applying to a role specifically for DEI, how do you make sure that people don't all of a sudden say, oh, well, I'm sure they'll be happy to do this work? How do you make a strong enough resume and a strong enough cover letter that you're really helping people see that, yeah, I think we all, in every office, everyone should be doing DEI work. It should not be isolated to one person. And so, it's okay to show that lens, but at the same time, if you're applying to, be the head of the events in the office, or if you're applying to be the person who manages alumni in the office, if you're applying to those other roles who do not have a specific DEI description, I think you need to make sure that your narrative, your resume, look at the different styles of resumes where you can really get some of make sure that the message comes across that you are much more than that. And I'm going to stop and see if one of my other colleagues want to jump in on this one.
I'll jump in real quick, Darryl. I think that this is spot on, right? I mean, one of the things that I have always been kind of from the start of my career, and so I started my career in Ohio, spent a lot of time there in Ohio ACAC, and not my first role, but my second role and my third role in admissions were all DEI focused. And, I think one of the things that I always got nervous about for me was, am I going to be pigeonholed now to only do diversity, equity, and inclusion work? Is this going to be something that now my career is going to be defined because I'm a Black man, because I'm a gay man? Are these the things that are going to define what the rest of my work is? And so, I think it's really important to really to that last point especially, and I found it true for me, is know that there are opportunities that do exist beyond that specific DEI work. And that DEI work is so important, right? And it's, again, why I spent the first part of my career really focused on that. But I think that that's actually now helped me be a better AVP, right? I think that there's things that I have learned from that. There's a way that I look at applications when students come through, or look at resumes when folks are applying for positions. I think there's a way that we can look at that in a way that other folks can. So know that you don't have to always be pigeonholed into that area if you feel like that there's more, and not even more, because I don't want it to feel like the DEI work is less than, because we all know that it's not, but know that there are other opportunities that do exist for folks of color outside of specific DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion related work.
And it's really important, as was said, that this is a responsibility of everyone in the office. And you need to ask, these are the ways I'm going to be involved in DEI work. That's great. How are you involved? Person who's interviewing you, person who's screening you. How is everyone else involved in diversity work? What else are the ways that they make a difference in this world? You need to ask that. Make sure that everybody sees it as their responsibility.
And in our world, People clamor for those international jobs. I mean, pre-pandemic, but think about it. The travel budget's huge. The miles you build up, everything you get is huge. But the thing I want everybody to ask is, all right, do you support domestic diversity, equity, and inclusion to the same level or a commensurate level that you do international recruitment? Is there equity or some level of equity in how we do what we do domestically? People clamor for international. They should do the same if the world were just and right with domestic DEI work. So it's about understanding that you gotta know the office culture, you gotta know who's into it, you gotta know full institutional support, and we could have a whole other webinar on how you go from doing the handoff from the great work you do in admission to the work the rest of the institution needs to do to retain people. So, anything else to add before we get to doing the actual job? So you took the offer, you accepted it, and now what?
Actually, before we get
Yeah.
to that, I do want to stress sort of in the sort of last thing before you before you get the job, make sure you know the landscape that you're walking into. I mean, I think, you know, I mean, some of us like a good challenge, but, you know, I'll tell you that if you don't see there's a commitment beyond the admission office to some level of diversity, to some level of support of even admission goals, that's probably a good sign for you that you all are going, that admission itself is an island. And then if you're doing work that isn't supported by everybody else, then that's also, then you become an island within an island. And so are you ready for that type of isolation, if you will? I mean, so, but, you know, but sometimes it's just that, you know, sometimes it's really not the mission. Sometimes it's just that they have a really bad website. And I can say that I think we've had a bad website. so that's been one of my things that I've been just championing. I said, you know, we do a lot, but we need to make sure that it's out there, not only for the students that we serve, but for anyone who's looking. You know, anyone needs to know what, you know, that this is a top-down commitment. And to be quite honest, if it's not a top-down commitment, no matter what you do, it's never going to really do that stuff, make that substantive change. So anyway, you can go on now. All right, so do you want me to start? Okay.
Yeah, because there's a lot, but like there's a lot that suddenly bubbled up in me about some things in the past when people, you know, back in '85 when I was the brown person in the office, replacing the other person who was the brown person in the office. It's like, well, you're automatically doing the diversity work. I'm cool with that, but I am more than that. And even as we were doing the job, there were things that sometimes I mentioned that were ideas that when other people mentioned them after me, that's when it was implemented. So what I'm going to do is shut my mouth because I got to process some things. So you take it.
Well, and again, this is a group project. So, and it's a group project that actually is a group project, unlike some of the work that we do in our office, but that's another day. so, so anyway, I think, you know, and it was interesting because this first sort of bullet was just one of those things that I said, you know, when we talk about, you know, sort of one of the things that people of color tend to do well is that we really have a great sense of respect for people at varying levels in the office, no matter where, and not just in our office, in our communities. And I know that as a student, you know, I made it through college, not just because of all the people that had the titles. I made it through college because of the person in the lunchroom. I made it through college because of the person who cleaned the bathrooms, who saw me as, you know, someone that was sort of, you know, living the dream, if you will. And I think there's a respect that we have, or an awareness that we have, of the importance of individuals throughout the community, and especially those people of color who may be some of the only people that some of your students might meet in some areas. So I would say doing the job, and in that first bullet, I think we naturally, like, let's harness that superpower. I think we naturally come into the office and we want to know everybody. We say hello to everybody. We give respect to everybody. The person picking up the trash in the mornings. We give that natural respect because, you know, we may even have those people in our family, and we understand that you know, it's all about opportunity. You know, they may be just as smart as we are, but they didn't have the same opportunity. And so I think so I think lean into that, because I think a lot of times that actually serves you well. I think we all know that when you take care of, you know, everyone in the office, people notice. I also think that, you know, even if you're just talking about the people at the front desk who answer the phone, who do the data entry, who do all of that, we tend to understand how their value perhaps a little bit more than some of our colleagues on the other side. And so, you know, I mean, you know, we give respect. We may say, you know, Ms. Nancy, we may say something like that. And so, you know, I think, and that is, and sometimes people will look at me quizzically, say, sometimes even some of my younger staff members who are not people of color will look and say, you know, why are you putting that, you know, Ms. in front of that? And, you know, it's the way I was raised, and that's not something I want to abandon. I mean, they are just as important than I am. So I think that respect is natural. We talked about the wiggle room. So please, colleagues, you know, jump in anytime. But I think there is, it's unfortunate, however you cut it, but we are not given the grace of others. There are some people who can, you know, make a mistake, then turn around and make the same mistake. Even though I have always said, you know what, if I make a mistake, you will never see me making the same mistake. You may see me making another mistake because I'm human, but I know that I have to learn from any mistakes that I make so that I'm not making the same mistake. And there's not a grace that's given to us. It's just real. When we're talking about like what is different in the office, you know, yes, we can go to human resources and we feel like we're, you know, we're not being treated well, but understand there's also a fact that I've heard about human resources. Human resources is there to protect the institution, not you. So, you know, again, you know, you have to just make sure that, and again, it's not fair, but sometimes you have to make sure that you've done all your checklist and you can come out of this clean before you are able to really point to the inequities in your office. So I'm gonna stop there and let my colleagues jump in.
Yeah.
But check this out, folks. You know, Tamara, that whole thing is what leads sometimes to imposter syndrome, because we're like, do we belong here? Do we have that level of excellence? Do people see our black, brown, yellow, etc. excellence? Do they understand excellence? Do they get that my support system, because I might be fewer in numbers, and granted, I have a great situation now, but do people get that we feel that lack of ability to make mistakes? Like other people talk about, oh, let's take a manageable, assignable risk. sometimes we don't feel like we get the chance to do that. So what you brought up for me in particular is how I felt until I turned 30. So this fear of making mistakes can actually paralyze you sometime into inaction. And as we look at things like learning what it takes to grow, get promotions, get raises, part of what we have to understand is this piece about excellence. We have to be it, live it, see it, drink it in. I'm going to calm down now, but Derek or Ralph, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I think what this brings up in me is the topic of self-care. And maybe we'll get to some of this a little bit more kind of through the rest of the presentation. But I think because we don't have the same grace that is sometimes afforded to our white colleagues, I at least find myself trying to find ways to make sure that I am taking care of myself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, as I go through this job, because that fear to, what Darryl really said, for me, sometimes that can be paralyzing for me. And I think for me, especially in the role that I have at the institution that I have, it sometimes even feels like as the leader in the office, I don't have the ability to make mistakes in the same way that I obviously provide to my staff as they're going through the process. And so self-care is just one of the things that's really coming up in my mind. And, I think for us as folks of color, it is really, really important that we find those ways to take care of ourselves, knowing that we may have some pressures on us that others may not necessarily experience. And that self-care obviously can come in all sorts of different ways, right? For me recently, it's been many nights baking cookies and eating those cookies in the same night that I'm baking those cookies. And that's been a way that I have, found to, take care of myself and to make me feel better. While it doesn't work as well for my, waistline, it is something that I have found that helps me in the process. And so I think it's important for us to really think about, and for all of you as listeners in this and participants in this, to really think about what are those ways in which we care for ourselves, knowing that excellence is all that we can be. We can't deviate from kind of that standard.
And I want to circle back to the first point about respecting others the way that we do naturally show a lot more respect often. I think that's really true of communities of color. But also remember to respect yourself and your own qualifications. You are there for a reason. Do not be afraid to speak up and express your opinion, to ask questions and say, I see this differently. The way I see this is this way. I don't understand why we've done this particular way. Can we talk about it? And especially when there are other people of color on the staff, maybe even more senior people of color. Don't downplay your own perceptions and your own ideas and your own view about what's going on in the office, and speak out, because that's going to be in the end valued. And if it's not, then that's a whole other issue that we have to talk about.
And remember if you were here last week, or if you have a chance to listen to last week, one of our major messages, we're not a monolith. So not like, so it could be that the other, POC people in your office may not be the people that you need to turn to for mentorship. I think that, there may be somebody else in the community. There may be somebody, we're going to talk about, sort of that, making those connections beyond your office walls. Maybe there's somebody who identifies with you more. And as, the woman in the room, I think it can end up being really, really complex when you add being a female on top of all of this, or, female identified, because I think we are, between, all the messages we got in school about, we're not technical, we're not as good at the technical stuff, and admission is about data. And a lot of admission is about like being able to get comfortable with data, learn how to, manipulate data, learn how to look at, probabilities and everything like that. So I think that, when you put all of that together, sometimes we just don't tout our strength. as much, and we don't put ourselves out there. And I think it's important that we do, because I think what you'll also see with us, all of us have risen to some level of leadership. It's important for us to get to that level of leadership, because then we can change the rules. And so, and that's why it's important, you know, to hopefully support each other, even if we're not at the same institution, and to cheer when we all make it, when somebody makes it to that lofty office. But and I think we have this, like, you know, expand, and an institution should be able to tell you what it takes to grow and be promoted every year. If you're not having that conversation, you know, if you start that conversation and it's not welcomed, that's a problem. Because, you know, I mean, no one should want you to go into the next year without some aspiration. I mean, yes, we talk about what you did, but it should be, I mean, it doesn't matter how far you get up in this business. You know, you should be having something else you can aspire to, even if your title doesn't change. There is more, there's always going to be more work. There's always going to be more nuances to this. I mean, even if you, like, you know, if you're talking about supporting, and I see that it's like, what if your institution doesn't have a transparent growth development plan, or it changes when they promote POCs in the office? I think sometimes that is where you have to use some of the peer pressure. You have to start doing your research on what happens at other institutions, and maybe bring that to the attention. It's like, maybe sometimes it's overlooked. And maybe I'm wrong about that. I'm going to let my fellow colleagues jump on in on that one, because I think there's a lot going on there. But I think I don't even think that's healthy for the institution. You know, the institution is laying itself open to some level of lawsuit or challenge if they're not providing clear paths for people to be, you know, to talk about how they're going to advance in this work. So others, please.
I think one of the things for me that, and we've talked about it, I think we mentioned it last week during the session, I think we mentioned it 2 weeks ago during our first session, is, you know, in some cases, it is important to think about moving out in order to move up, and you know, knowing that, you know, there are some institutions out there that, you know, if they do change it up when they promote people of color in the office, like if they're changing the rules while you're going through the process, do you want to be a part of that kind of an office culture? Is that the place that you really think you're going to be best served? And to really think about, okay, what moves then do I need to make in order to move up? And again, sometimes that's moving out. And, you know, I'm currently on my 4th institution that I've worked for. In a relatively short amount of time, in 11 years or so, I've been at 4 different institutions. And you know, for me, I've had good experiences really at the vast majority of the places I've been at, which is good. But, you know, for me, it still was, in order to make that leap to be promoted and to really think about what that next step was in my career, it really was the connections that I made across the different professional organizations that we're a part of. It's keeping an eye out for those other opportunities. It's maintaining relationships with other people that I used to work with. All of my last 3 jobs that I've had literally are jobs that I did not originally apply for. They were jobs that I was not seeking. There was people that had great experiences with me from a previous institution or from a professional organization that said, hey, Derek, there's this associate director position at Loyola. I think you'd be a great fit. Derek, my former supervisor from Xavier University in Cincinnati, called me up and was like, there's a director at Columbia College Chicago. I think you're ready. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not ready for this. And she's like, no, you are, and you need to apply, right? And so sometimes it's taking those steps, and it's listening to your circle. It's listening to your people, your mentors, the folks that you have on your side who are also going to help you navigate kind of that upward movement.
Yeah, and I want to jump in on that, sort of the need to sometimes change institution, because twice I've gotten a promotion when I did look at other positions and my boss knew about it and knew I was looking somewhere else, and suddenly realized, we might want this person to stick around, so let's give them the opportunity here for advancement. So twice that helped me really well, just putting it out there that I was looking. And Darryl, you were going to get to one of the questions that was submitted?
Yes, so I think the question, the prior question was answered, about how to seek mentors. Tamara talked about that, which can come from within your office, outside of your office at the same institution. And as you look at the PowerPoint, you're going to build relationship with other people at other institutions, special interest groups, regional ACACs. But there's another one about how to get everyone in the office to see the importance of doing DEI work and recruitment. So recurring theme, my friends, because so far this will be the third straight week that we've talked about the fact that many offices do what I call apartheid recruitment. You are the person with that much melanin, so you're going to go to certain schools. And, we talked about this last week, but it's like, how can it be that if two people go to New York City, so the Young Women's Leadership School of East Harlem is at 105th Street, and then there are schools like Nightingale Bamford, Sacred Heart, Spence, Chapin. You know what I'm talking about, T. That in some cases, some of them are 11 blocks. And let me just tell y'all, the blocks are a little shorter north-south on the Upper East Side. But what you're going to do, melanin person, is you're going to go to the East Harlem schools, Central Park East, Twills East Harlem, as we call it, et cetera, Heritage School. But somebody else is going to hit up Trevor Day, Chapin, Spence, Brearley, etc. Come on, y'all. So you have to be willing to call out what is incorrect, and that is, why are you sending two people to New York City at the time you send them? Because that's expensive. Second, why aren't you good enough to visit these schools with more diversity? Or why don't you think I am good enough to visit those schools that may not have as much diversity? So the way you have to do, it's a process, but you have to work yourself to a point that you can call out these things and say, this is what should be done. Some of that reinforcement is going to come from your colleagues, again, that are maybe within the institution, but a lot of my reinforcement came from being involved at either the state and regional or national level, the special interest groups that we all have now, and then my colleagues that you see right here. There are times, and I will say this for the third straight week, that when I hear from someone who mentions something like this, it's an irritant to me. So I will just look at Tamara for about 3 seconds, and she knows what I'm thinking, because she knows that I'm about to let loose on somebody at an office, thank goodness that's not mine, who is like, yeah, you're either saying that the person without as much melanin is not good enough to visit those schools, to interview those kids, to speak at that community-based organization, or you're saying that I'm not valued enough to speak at these $50,000 a year day schools. All right, I need to calm down. So somebody help me out.
But I think that there's something to be said about being the squeaky wheel, right? I mean, I think that to be the person in the office, to call things out in a way that's also very safe, because I think that, depending on your position and your role within your institution, there is a safety piece that really comes along with that, right? If you are someone who is quote unquote entry level, you just started, you're a couple of years in, you might have to find a different way to get around it versus someone in Darryl's position or Tamara's position or Ralph's position, my position, who can really actually really guide the work and make those really kind of demands, if you will, from top down, that this is what comes with the role. This is what comes with your territory. DEI recruitment is for everyone. This is something that everyone has to participate in. And so I do think being the squeaky wheel really can help. But again, I do think that it's really important to just, recognize the system and the systems at your institution, the role in which that you play at that institution. And that's not to say that you shouldn't be, if you're an entry-level person, that you shouldn't speak up, because you should. But I do want to make sure that you are looking at yourself and you're taking care of yourself in terms of your safety, your job security. Like, we need a job. Like, you need to be able to eat, you need to be able to live. And so, I don't want people to hear me say, I need to go out and just, cause all of this rigmarole for, and somehow put your job at risk. I'm certainly not saying that, but you have to find that balance. You have to, be strategic. You need to find those allies in your office who, maybe they aren't persons of color, but they get it. They're starting to get it. They're understanding it. They, want to be involved in that. Use those people to help build that conversation within your office. There are ways around doing it, but I do think that you have to think about and you have to really be strategic about how you approach it, depending on what your role is within the office.
Yeah, and you also have to just think about, for the conversation in the office, you have to think about the idea of, we are representing an institution that itself is diverse, hopefully. And when the students come to our campus to visit, they're going to encounter Latinos, they're going to encounter African Americans, but they're going to encounter white folks too. They need to see that we're all part of the same community, that we all represent these same values, and that we all can speak to the benefits of our diverse institution. So it works both ways. I need to, as a Latino, I need to be able to talk to my Latino students and really relate to them, but I need to be able to talk to the white students too and be able to let them relate to me, because that's part of the community I'm representing. And my white colleagues needed to be able to recruit students of color too, because otherwise you're just selling a false representation of that institution if you're not able to make those connections across all backgrounds. And that's everybody's job.
So we're talking about doing the job, but let's address this issue of, what if an office somehow doesn't have a transparent growth development plan? This is a great question to promote people of color. Like, what can we do? So let's give this person a resource. What do we do if an office doesn't have a plan? I mean, I say we need to create one, but can one of you sort of give guidance on how? Because we've all done it. But what was your success in creating it?
I'll tell you I think one of the things is, like, possibly even building on your allies. I remember, and I remember doing a session for some counselors, and it was part of a counselor fly-in program. And here I was, the coordinator of minority recruitment, but I was still an assistant director. And at the end of that session, those counselors literally said to my bosses, and they said, I don't understand how you can say that you're so committed to diversity, and your coordinator of minority recruitment, who has as many years of experience as she has, is still an assistant director. And I'll tell you, right after that, guess who became an associate director? It's like, so I think sometimes you have to utilize, if you're doing good work out there, there are people that want to see you advance. Like, they're the people that you work with each year, those counselors, those CBO directors, the people that belong to your counselor advisory group, those people can have influence on an office. And I'm not saying you go to them specifically, but if you've done some work with them, some good work, maybe ask them to reach out to your boss and say, like, write a nice note on your behalf. Let them know that how much you are valued, how important you are. Because I didn't ask for that, but it happened because they could see the work that I was doing. They could see my commitment. They could see it all, and it just didn't make sense for them. But I think we have to remember how old-fashioned some institutions are. They just are. And it's because somebody has never actually asked the question. It's not even that they're resistant. They've just done it for the same way for so long, and this is what we do, and you just have to be patient. But that's not really what's happening in the industry. And it's like, and sometimes if you just ask, it's amazing how sometimes things just get done because just nobody ever asked. But I also think it is important to find DEI doesn't just exist in admission. It's across the institution. So find your fellow DEI types across the institution and like, let's make some connections. Find out, what they're, you have to talk about salary, but sometimes you're not going to, but you're going to get a good sense whether somebody's getting more than you're getting for doing the same comparable work. I mean, I can tell you the DEI person in your business school is getting a whole lot more money than the person in the admission office. And I think sometimes you can say like, oh, well, okay, that person might leave eventually. I'm doing DEI work. I might as well do it in this area and get more money, get more recognition, get more respect, and those type of things. So don't think that DEI is just an admission construct only.
Yeah, I want to weigh in a couple things quickly here. First of all, being on the high school side for 19 years now, I weigh in all the time in people's business with my admission officers. I make phone calls, I send emails all the time because I know that that's one of the things that I can do to help support the people who come to my school, do a good job with my students and my programs. So I absolutely do that, and I'm not alone. There are a lot of us out there who will do that. But secondly, sort of getting back to the process of your office, especially what Lena's question here, when there's doesn't seem to be any way of going forward. A lot of times admission folks at the top think of admissions as, not really business, not really having to follow, procedures and methodical things. Sometimes you have to say, I have not had a formal written evaluation. I need to have something written down and submitted to human resources that I can see and comment on and respond to. There needs to be a formal process. And a lot of times offices will say, oh yeah, we've never done that before. We should get that going really, okay, we could do that. Insist on that process if it doesn't exist, and insist on standards if they don't exist, and say there needs to be a routine way where promotions can happen. And it can't be stuff that you're just making up on the fly because you like people. It needs to be in writing, and we need to see it.
And I think being able to really ask that tough question of what does the system look like? What opportunities are there? I think one of the one of the great things for me being in the role that I am is that I can have very frank conversations with folks about why we aren't doing promotions right now, or the challenges that, and part of that is just my leadership style. I'm just very, very transparent, probably more than I should be. But I think that transparency, though, helps at least give folks an understanding of why or why not, something can happen. And so for me, I have had moments where I have told colleagues of color, right now, I really don't, I have pushed with HR. I have tried to do what I can to create this position. And sometimes I've failed at that, right? Despite, me really trying to push for what it was that I needed. And sometimes in those situations, I've helped those colleagues tweak their resume, get their cover letter together, get things together in order to, again, to the point earlier, move on in order to move up. And I recognize that sometimes I can't provide what it is that my team or my staff is. And again, I think being a person of color, I recognize that, and I can then advise folks in terms of what that next step might look like, whether it is, here's a great position at this other institution, even despite the fact I might not want them to leave, I want them to go on and do other things, but I also know that that's really good for their growth in their development as a human being, as a professional within this industry. And so sometimes, you have to have those harder conversations with your supervisor, again, depending especially on the relationship in which that you have with those leaders in your office.
And to build on that, I think one other thing, like this is a very practical thing. Have you seen your job description since you got it? It's like, so I think that is something, that's a gap that often happens, is that you started out with one job description and the institution has like all of these internal coding and blah, 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 and you get this at this level and it's like, and because no one has ever updated what you actually do in the office, there's no reason for anybody outside of your office to push for you to be making different money or to be at a different level. Because once you, if you can prove that, well, I started this job, I didn't have supervisory things. I actually have supervisory things now. You're in a different area. And it's like, and if your job description hasn't been updated to reflect all of the things that you do in your job, that's often the first step. So maybe even it's just, at that time of year, you say, hey, can we just review my job description to make sure that we're on the same page as to what I'm supposed to be doing and what are my areas of purview? And I think even just doing that exercise and saying, that could also open some eyes, say, well, look at this, all these things that I'm doing that, so is that really the description of what you expect my position to be doing? Or is this the description of something else that has a different pay grade, has a different level, has a different classification, and maybe we should get me reclassified? How about that?
So this is related to the very beginning. We said know your worth. You have to know your worth, and you have to use the outside to support you. To the person who asked about, there's not really a promotion plan, doing the same job several years, et cetera, et cetera. This is where every time you do a school visit, if you connect and really vibe with students and a high school counselor, that counselor can send a thank you, but to your president, your VP, your dean or director, all of your superiors, it is okay to ask for those kudos to be sent to people above you, because they're going to start realizing your value. Do your networking. Again, it's not just within your office, but it's special interest groups, ACACs, etc. The growth that you happen to sustain is what feeds part of your value to the external world. And my ultimate goal when I'm training people is simply this: be so valuable that people would hate to lose you to your institution's direct competition, because it would destroy them. So be that good. So I do understand that there are bottlenecks that happen within institutions, within our regional affiliates and other things. But if you heard one thing, it's this: know your job description, and then understand what it takes to get paid to do all the things you do. Because while we might be the Latinx student union, Black student union, something or other informal advisor, well, that's retention work, my friends. Get paid for it. Get paid to do what you do. Team, is there anything else we need to cover about doing your job before we talk about actually the joy of the work we do, despite how tiring it can be at times?
One of the things, Darryl, that this was one of the comments that came through the chat directly to the panelists, is one of our attendees who has questioned herself about being good enough to recruit in the non-POC schools. In that it looks like that sometimes dealing with counselors at some of these schools will send requests to others while I'm in there, while I'm actually their territory manager. How do you deal with that? I mean, how do you deal with, high school counselors potentially? Maybe Ralph, I'm really curious on your take. would you go behind your territory manager's back to, go ask for another territory manager? Like how do we handle that? How do you handle that? And then how do you, again, kind of back to that self-care part of it, how do you then not internalize that as a person of color, in terms of not being good enough to recruit at some of these high-end schools?
Wow, that's just like the most blatant kind of privilege I ever heard. I being on this side, I can't imagine having the audacity to ask for somebody specifically over somebody else. I mean, I have no doubt that it happens, but it's just such a toxic thing to do to an admission officer. I think that the line has to be consistent in your office. Thanks for contacting me. Thanks for asking for me. But Derek is your case officer. Derek will be getting back to you, and forward and copy, and then copy the dean as well. Just the whole office has to be prepared to hold that line. The decisions you make for regional responsibilities have a lot of different moving parts, and maybe people who haven't worked admissions don't realize that, but I certainly do. And so I'm never going to question that, and I don't think that you should tolerate it when others do either. If they weren't qualified, they wouldn't have been hired, and we're sending them to you because they do represent us. Thank you very much. You will accept the person that we're sending. So that one's kind of annoying me, I gotta admit.
No, I think it happens sometimes because the board of at the school's institution wants a certain level of position title to say that we brought all the deans in, or we brought all, and it doesn't get any better. I mean, I'm a deputy director, and then it's sometimes, well, we really need somebody who is the director or the VP. I mean, it just gets worse. And I'm like, I've been at Rice for 27 years. It's like, if I don't know it, chances are I don't get known. And so, like, I mean, but I think I even have to check myself in this area, because sometimes, because I've been in there so long, people will naturally reach out to me. But I'm like, you know what? How am I ever going to bring staff up to the fore? I pushed back on one of those this week, and I said, I said, I was not available, but even so, I would have said, this is really your territory manager, and this person has this number of years in admissions experience, and wouldn't it be great for your students in this interaction to actually connect with the person who's going to be looking at their application, to have to usher their application through the process? So, I mean, I will never see their application. Well, I will see their application again because I'm a committee chair, but but for the most part, a lot of people, like, I'm not going to be reading it. I'm not going to be the person, like, if you want anybody to remember this kid's name, you want that person to remember that kid's name. So I think sometimes when you push back and put it in those terms, all of a sudden they realize, oh yeah, we need to start creating that. Like, I'm not going to be the person who handles yours. If you decide to call and you want to find out what happened to your applicants, ain't gonna be me. So you better want to make some relationships with the people that actually, because we all know that a good part of this is somebody being able to add that little extra on top and say, oh yeah, I met that kid at the school visit, or I remember how excited they were about, the institution. So I do think that the system can be a little perverted, and as people are, saying, oh, well, we want to be able to, at the end of the year, for our end of the year report, said we not only had these schools there, but we had the people in charge. I'm going to tell you, I mean, I love some of my bosses, but sometimes they're not in the day-to-day work. So you really do want the people who are going to be able to give you, like, the day-to-day story. So I think sometimes we just have to push back, retrain, and explain to people why you really do want this person to be the one doing your presentation.
And that is exactly why, as you're doing these things, your network is so important, because your network within, outside the institution, that's your strength, folks.
I don't want to leave this slide before I do having worked in regional ACAC leadership and national leadership, I do want to say that we want you to make connections. Sometimes we understand that some of you, sometimes depending on where you are regionally, you may not be able to have the same access to leadership opportunities as some of your white counterparts. And I'm not, sometimes I don't even think they know what they're doing. It's so ingrained in them that they're not even realizing that they're not developing leaders of color in their affiliate. And it's like, and so when we on the national level, we're asking about, we need people to work at the national level. If the affiliate isn't developing those people, where are we supposed to get them? Well, that's why the SIGs exist. So if your affiliate isn't supporting you and helping you to get like really good experiences that are going to, and not just the A&I work, there's a lot of different committees and affiliates. One of the best things that I ever did was being the treasurer of my affiliate. Know where the money goes, know how the money works. And it's one of the best things that's not only served me as a leader in my affiliate as a whole. I can't even imagine being a president if I hadn't been a treasurer, because you understand how that money works. And it's like, and you don't have to depend on somebody else to explain it to you if you know how money works. And believe me, you can take that back to your own office, because guess what? Budgets are real. And so as you climb up, there's going to be a lot more emphasis on managing budgets. And so anything that you can learn from from even that volunteer experience of the regionals, but SIGs are a great way to also develop leadership. And we've even changed some of the NACAC rules that you don't have to necessarily have served in a leadership position within your affiliate. But if you've served as a leader of a SIG, you're also eligible for national leadership.
Yeah,
So,
and getting budgetary experience, whether it's in your office or through an affiliate or through NACAC, is gold. Getting to know and work with numbers is such a great skill that will build your resume no matter what else is on it. Absolutely.
People of color have to build our brand. We have to, again, be excellent. We have to enhance our connections. We have to be prepared to work more and better at the start, but you can't do it forever. You have to work to a point that you can actually ask for and guard your time, and then later on, you don't have to ask for it. You just guard your time because you've built enough credibility that people know that whatever you're doing, even if it's just sitting and thinking, people know that what you're doing is legit. And before we go to finding your joy, Tamara, Derek, Ralph, it's time for a little real talk, because racism in our jobs is an energy vampire. I'll give you the example. I'm going to start this off and then somebody pick me up. Every damn time somebody says, well, you speak so well, you're so articulate. It's an energy vampire, because you know that what you want to say is, excuse me, I was brought up to speak well, and I'm an educator, and I'm going to read your kid's application. Don't act so surprised that I'm so articulate. Who else has something to say that's real talk about one of those fake compliments, or when you call people out on things, the microaggressions, the tears that follow? How do you deal?
I just love the looks that I get when I walk out into the lobby and someone will be like, they'll ask, I want to speak to the manager, to the AVP or the VP. And so I get dispatched because I run the show at Columbia, and it's always that look. It's just that look. All they have to do is do that look. And I know what they're thinking. How is this Black? Yes, and young, and we've talked about that a couple of weeks ago in one of our sessions about the age thing. That's a challenge for me. More so, like, people just they just expect a very specific thing, and And I eat it up, right? I mean, I play into it. I'm Derek Brinkley. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Undergraduate Admissions. I hear you have some challenges, some issues. You got some problems. And like, I just, I lean into that kind of stuff because that's just, it's fun sometimes to just lean into it and knowing that they're thinking certain things about me.
Child, they're blowing it up in the chat. Child, I just got it's like, ooh, Lord. If I can't tell you how many times, times.
Oh, this one's good. I have a quick story I do want to tell about when people confuse you for another Black person because they never took the time to differentiate us. So there was another Black guy in my office at one point. He was an assistant director, great guy. Just saw him today. He stopped by the office, which was lovely. He's about the same height as me or whatever, but we have a director of enrollment systems at our institution. And on my first day at the college, she goes up to the other guy, the assistant director, who had been at the college for 5 years at that point in time, went up to him and told him welcome to the team when he's worked there for 4 years because she thought that I was him. Like, how does that, like, why? I don't get it. How's that work?
Child, I mean, yeah.
I got to tell a quick story here too. When I started Albuquerque Academy, the same year, Rolando Villegas started as the head of the language department. And people would mix us up so often that we'd have these little fairs at the academy for recruiting students. We would stand at each other's tables just to see if anybody noticed the difference, And people would say, "You can't do that, you can't do that." And I said, "Well, then quit treating us like we're the same person." So that was kind of one way that we had of sort of fighting back with a little bit of humor, but it was just annoying. I mean, again, we all know that microaggressions are such a problem because it's a little nick, it's a little cut, it's a little chop, tiny little one. And when it happens the 10th time, that's when you feel like blowing up. And those are not easy to handle. And it's not your imagination, and you're not blowing things out of proportion. And that's what you have to realize, that sometimes how you cope with it is you have to find a way to cope with it and keep your cool, but you don't have to accept them. You don't have to apologize for letting those anger you or annoy you, and you have to say, well, look, thanks for talking to me, but I'm not Derek. Derek's over there, and let people feel their embarrassment when they make those kind of mistakes, and turn it back on them, and smile and be polite, but just realize that, no, where am I from? Where are you from? You must be asking because I'm new to this area. You haven't seen me before. Where are you from? What do you mean? Do you mean what is my nationality? Do you mean what is my ethnicity? And put it back on people is kind of one way that you can deal with that. But it's hard, and I'm not going to deny that it's hard to have that happen all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think we give people too many passes on this one. I mean, on the where you, I mean, but also make sure that, well, and we had that last week. It's like, what if you tell your predominantly white colleagues and they're like, oh, it's just a mistake. And it's like, do not, I mean, somebody else already, I think this already been said, do not let people gaslight you. It's never acceptable, never. And it's like, I kind of like being like having fun with a telemarketer. At that point, all bets are off because I'm going to try to figure out why is it that you have confused me with somebody else. Even if you don't know me, you should know the other person. I mean, like, it's just like, so like, why are you confusing me for that other person? If that's somebody you've worked with, you shared an experience with. I mean, I can't tell you, I'm like, I'm a relatively Zoftig chick. And I wear glasses. I have a very distinct look. When people tell me, oh, you're wearing your hair differently. What? I mean, really? Yes, that was like, I mean, I have colleagues that change their hair, color their hair, cut their hair. Like, it may not even be the same thing every month to month, and I can recognize who they are. I put my hair in braids versus having it straight, and you can't tell who I am. And it's like, I mean, I'm sorry. I agree that, when you're starting out in this profession, sometimes you're going to be hit by things, and it's just all of a sudden you're just, you don't want that call back to your office from some, insensitive alumni, because alumni are the worst. I'm gonna tell you that right now. They are the absolute worst when it comes to stuff like that. And walking up to tables and thinking they can say anything to you. And it's like, and thinking that, but at some point, again, you have to know your worth. You have to know that you are better than that. And you have to, I mean, and if they're saying that to you, think about what they might be saying to your students. So that's why sometimes you have to step in the way and do that uncomfortable thing, because you definitely don't want that person feeling that it's okay to like mix up, like all of a sudden they mix up the students that they're interacting with because they can't disseminate that. I mean, they can't distinguish between the look. I mean, my God, I wear glasses. I wear very specific glasses. And like, you're confusing me with somebody who doesn't even wear glasses, who is 2 inches shorter and 50 pounds lighter. How do you do that? So it's not a pass any longer. And I think, for anyone who's hopefully you have some good sensitive ear in the office. I'm sorry if you don't, but if you are lucky enough to have somebody on a supervisory level who you can go to, do not let those microaggressions stand. If you don't tell us about it, if like I found out about one of my team members, and I'm like, I went straight to the alumni area, and I'm like, she will not have that person paired with her again, not at all, because she does not deserve that. She needs to be doing her job. If they don't know any better than to ask her certain questions about, oh, you didn't go to our school, like all of a sudden her school is totally invalid because she didn't go to my institution. These things cannot stand. And the only reason they stand is because, again, we lean too far into the respect for some of those people. Some of those people are not worthy of our respect.
So professorial excellence isn't based on having attended that school. The excellence of deans outside of the admission office is not based on having gone to that particular school. So why do we even have to defend credibility for not having gone to a school? We are professionals. We are professionals. We have to, again, know our worth. So we've covered the first slide of finding your joy, which actually has a negative tint. But sorry, folks, I was a little fired up, and I knew the team would be. But let's talk about these things. So, Tamara, how, you do some interesting things beyond the profession, but can each of us talk a little bit about how we find our joy both in the office and outside? What do we do to recharge the battery, to refuel, to center, to find peace, to conserve our souls? So Tamara, you first, please.
I'm not sure if that's fair, because I've been there long enough that there was a point at which I said, you're going to take this as it exists. And that includes my sense of humor. That includes the fact that I am not trying to talk over people, but I'm naturally, like, my voice is loud. You're not going to tell me my voice is too loud, because that is natural to me. That is how I speak. I'm an actress by training. I've learned to project. It is part of who I am. I'm not going to change who I am because all of a sudden it makes you uncomfortable. So I think that leaning into my personality in the office, and then also knowing that sometimes I'm going to be the one who has to say what everybody else is thinking. I have to step into that space for some of my staff who don't feel comfortable saying, but I can see it on their face. I can, if they could say it, I can see it. And I would be the person to put myself in the way and say, look, and there's actually quite a pleasure in that when you get to that level, and you can say what you want to say, and what needs to be said. It's not, I mean, it's not like I'm just trying to, you know, be provocative. I'm usually saying something that absolutely has to be said. But you got to give yourself a life outside of this work. This work will eat you alive. It will. And it almost destroyed me in my first 3 years, because again, it's that combination of the work itself being challenging, but not feeling that we have the ability to be anything less than excellent. And when you put those two together, you end up getting into a work mill, and you can begin to sacrifice the things that bring you joy. You like say, you know, I need to probably take a 30-minute break to go and just walk around and get my head clear, but I don't feel like I have that ability. Believe me, other people are taking that break. But you know, and for a while there, I felt like I really couldn't do my theater because, you know, it takes up time at night, and I maybe need to be available for an admission event. You know, forget that. I've got one life. I mean, I've got one life, and it's not always going to be this job. And if that is what brings me joy, that helps me get outside of a space. And I will say that my theatrical work has helped me in terms of my professional work. I mean, I think, you know, when you're doing something of that level, it brings you empathy. It brings you the ability to step in somebody else's shoes. It's like, so it brings you, you know, just a better awareness of the world at large and the different personas that people have to occupy in this world. And so when you give up too much, you actually might not be doing good things for yourself professionally as well. So that's where I'm going to leave it.
Yeah, and I will say that you really absolutely need to find the other things outside of work that bring you joy. And for me and for my wife, it's always been service through our church and other community organizations. We do a lot of service. And then most recently, there's been a new adventure for us, and that's my wife, who's our state representative here in Albuquerque, running for re-election this year. And this has been a whole new thing. And I really want to encourage all of y'all. It's an election year. Get involved in local politics. There's so much good that you can do, so much value that you can add to any campaign that you want to join. So that's going to be my little push here. Go for it. And check out NatalieForNewMexico.org.
That's right. You better promote the wife. I love it.
Right.
How do I find my joy? I think, you know, it's interesting. I think in the office, and for those of you who may have been in some of these sessions before, you probably heard a little bit about our office. I work in a very diverse office, right? About 60% of our folks in my office are women. A little less than half of our folks are folks of color. About 33% of us, a third of us, identify as members of the LGBTQ community. And so because of how my office is set up, we have a lot of fun in my office. Today, I was just in a situation, so one of my colleagues, Margaret Jones, who's amazing, kind of found this thing on Facebook, and it was a joke, you know, a couple of months ago, and it was, or a month ago or so. And essentially it was, you know, if I get 1,000 comments and 10 shares and 50 likes, my boss will agree to let me pour water on them, right? And so she sent a screenshot to me in a text, and she was like, do you mind if I do this? I was like, I don't care. Like, sure, go for it. Like, let's have fun with it. And so she was able to, within 27 hours, as she likes to remind me, was able to get all of the criteria of that post done. And so today was the day that it was the first time I had seen her since everything had gone down with the quarantine. And today, you know, we went outside at the end of the day. I cooked biscuits, homemade biscuits, sourdough biscuits, and gravy, sausage gravy that I do that's really good. So there were 5 of us in the office today. 4 out of 5 of us are Black folks. And so we had biscuits and gravy for breakfast. Margaret and Kat, one of the other girls, made chicken and macaroni and cheese for lunch. So we did that for lunch. And then at the end of the day, they poured water on me, and I donated money to the Thurgood Marshall Fund. That's like how I find my joy within my office, right? It's the fun things that we find ourselves doing, the community that we've really built in my office. We're a very, very, very tight-knit crew. And so I realize how lucky I am to have a team that I've been able to build that really, provides those kind of opportunities for us to come together in fellowship. And so, we find our joy in our office in those kind of ways. Outside of the office for me, it's, I do a lot of watching TV. I listen to music a lot. I spend a lot of time with my partner and his dog. And, I really make sure, and I think it's something for me that's really come with time and with experience. I used to be the person that, to what we've kind of been talking about, that I've always felt like I had to work twice as much to get, half as much as everyone else. And so, for me, during my first several years of my career, I just was grinding all the time and working and working and working and doing what I needed to do and climbing that ladder. And I have found and realized that while cool, like great, I've gotten to a point in my career that I'm obviously very happy with, at the same time, I have to have a life outside of the office. And I encourage all of you to make sure that you have a life outside of your office. Make sure that you find those ways to really seek joy in other things, and know that the work is going to be there the next day. The work is going to be there the next day.
So when you know your worth, there can be joy in the office. When you have safe spaces that you have, that may be within your office with a colleague or two, maybe outside of your office, but again, maybe a part of your network beyond your institution, there is joy in that. When you can manage both professionalism and the realness of personal trauma that can happen for you or people who are students who look like you, there is joy. When you can say that there are enough people of color in your office, that they have a different vibe, that they have a different agenda, but we got to stick together to support one another, there is joy. Because folks, we are not a monolithic culture. We have to lift each other up whenever we can. We got to understand each other. We have to know the cost of emotional labor. We have to know how to deal with those who say, I don't see color, and know how to correct them instead of letting it eat at us, letting it eat away at us, and letting it consume us. We have to know what the cost is. We have to get paid to do it literally and figuratively. We have to tap into all the resources. Again, they may not come from within your office, but we've got to know what brings us joy in the office. Outside, I'm 57. I've had time to do hobbies. Probably in this dwelling, I might have, 30-some different musical instruments that I play. I love cooking, but Derek, that gravy though, bruh,
Ooh.
You got to truck some of that 10 blocks north of Howard up to Evanston.
I'm telling you, and it's homemade breakfast sausage. So I get the ground pork and I throw in fresh sage and I've got nutmeg. It is so good.
And so the tube, not them patties that Jimmy
Right. No, this is for real. I make it myself.
And right now the panelists are like, we're talking about sausage and gravy. That's what you do. When you move up people.
But to build off of that, don't, in terms of finding the joy in the work, when you go to places, don't, do pamper yourself. Even if it's not on the office dime, if you're going someplace and you're going to really, someplace you haven't been, find that good place to eat, because there's gonna and if you can't find a good place to eat, try to get out of that territory. But, I will definitely be the one that says, if you're going to New Orleans, call me. I'll tell you where to go. It's and it won't cost you a whole bunch of money neither. But if you're going to New York, all of us can probably give you some suggestions. When you get that new territory, let's try to make it some fun and find out your office. I don't know how many of y'all have asked about your office policy or what your office policy is on travel and points and things like that, but work those points because those points have paid for, a number of things. If your office lets you keep them, that's sometimes that that, you know, that's what kind of like makes it kind of worth it sometimes. Now, all of a sudden, all of us aren't getting any points, but the points will come back. And so, and use them wisely. But I see that our contact information is there again. We still have a few minutes. You know, we do a lot of this presenting, but if there are things that you didn't feel comfortable asking tonight, you know, I mean, I understand that this space, I mean, I think again, all of us have a level of sort of, you know, security where we are. I'm probably going to get paid. I'm probably going to get pinged for that, you know, alumni are the worst comment. And you knew which alumni I'm talking about. I'm not talking about, you know, the ones, like, I'm not talking about every alumni. I'm talking about the ones who, you know, all of a sudden feel like you work for them. And I think that's you know, that's the ones I'm talking about. But I think, you know, if you don't feel like you had, even if this is I guarantee this is a safe space, but if you're not feeling, you know, particularly safe, we are your safe space. So, you know, email us separately, call us, contact us if you're trying to bounce something off of that. Let's see. So we have one more thing. So from Maria Elena, how you doing tonight? Actually, good question came up in one of the groups earlier. What happens when the allyship talk, whether performative or not, fade from, oh, yes, thank you for that reminder. I saw that earlier. Well, we know that some people aren't in this for the long haul. You know, it was performative. They felt good. They felt bad for a moment, but we know this doesn't change in a month, 2 months, 3 months, a year. You know, been going on since you've been hearing the alarm since 1619. Y'all just keep hitting snooze. I mean, you know, we know that some people don't have the fortitude to take this, what it takes to dismantle this incredible system of racism and power and white supremacy. They don't have it. They don't have the ability to take it to the level. We have to, and I don't have time for them. I don't think any of us have time for them anymore. I think we have to find the people that will like go with us and actually, you know, not just do the performative allyship, who are ready to be accomplices. And that's one of my one of my colleagues who's an activist. That's what he always says. And I, you know, again, I can be inspired by people above me, but I can certainly be inspired by people who are younger than me. And so, and he inspires me because he talks about that fact that he's been in some really tough battles as an activist. And he just also happens to do this admission work. But, you know, it's just, I mean, I think there was only so much we could expect if the institution isn't setting the tone. You know, that's the only way that conversation continues. Go ahead, Darryl.
I think that, Tamara, I think you're spot on. I think that I think some of that really has to be an institutional kind of piece, right? I mean, you know, we at Columbia, probably a couple of years ago, made the decision that we really wanted to strive to be an anti-racist institution. Our president talks about it at all of our admitted student days and all our programs and that kind of thing. And so, you know, we've got a task force that I am on to put together a group to actually truly do the work. And I mean, when I say like we're really trying to do the work, we've got some really, really like awesome people at Columbia who are truly dedicated to it. And, you know, we work with an outside organization in order to do that. So we're working with an organization called Siler. So it's like Chicago, nope, I'm not even gonna try to get the acronym correctly, but an organization that's actually helping us set up this process to put together a group of people across campus and it's not just about recommending policy and procedures. Like, this is something that has to happen. These are things that are directed from the president. And I think for us, it helps in a way that our president happens to be an Asian man, right? And so he understands some of what's really going on out there in the world. And so I think that you're spot on that some of that additional work has to really come from top down in many cases, because it's so easy for that work to really fade. As time goes on, people get, you know, they snap on and start looking at the next thing that's coming down the road, right?
So as you look at the work that we do, whether it's in DEI or not, I'm going to say it again, know your worth, know whose job is what, get those job descriptions made. If you need to sit down with someone, just do it. Get paid to do what you do. But you have to understand that what we want, what the four of us want for you, is to work to a point that, yes, you're going to be professional. Yes, you're going to be kind, but you don't have to use diplomacy. You just give it to them straight and you don't have repercussions. I typed in the chat earlier that something I learned from my grandmother a long time ago is that every word you speak needs to either be true or kind or necessary or some combination. So everything you say that might be necessary might be true also, but a person might not see it as kind, but it's necessary. So in the office, of course, we know we have to know our worth. Of course, we know we have to be excellent. But what we got to do is not be afraid to reach out, not be afraid to let it show, as Ralph said, hey, look, some other places value me. I'm looking, because they'll pay to retain you if you're that good. Understand how you find your joy. I mean, you want to talk about joy and food. Tamara, this is just pre-pandemic. Remember when you and I spoke at Dalton, kind of the top dog of all the Manhattan privates? People, these folks have a test kitchen at the top of their school, and we ate like royalty, so didn't have to spend any institutional dollars, and they gave us some good fluids to have too. But this is joy. So even though we were working, we got to hang out with great professionals and be together talking about the real joy of what we do. It matters because you matter. It matters because it's okay to care and ask to be cared for. That is what we want for you folks. So I will just say thanks for tuning in. And if anybody has any closing comments in the next minute and a half, let's have them.
Just a thanks for me as well. Thank you all for being with us this
Thank
evening.
you, guys.
We've enjoyed these last 3 weeks of this. Next week, we're doing a session actually for white managers next week. So I think that'll be interesting for us to take some of the feedback and some of the things that we've heard. Obviously, what you've shared with us is confidential, right? You know, we're not going to be attributing names or institutions or anything like that. But I think that we've got some really great things to really be able to approach with white managers as they are managing folks of color. And so just thank you all for being with us these last few weeks.
And we will definitely be taking that conversation about, well, it's about 3 months later. How y'all doing with those conversations about, you know, white fragility and things like that? So
Yes.
they better come ready. Thank you. You all enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks all. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, man. You again just knocked it out of the park. So thank you, and we'll holler at you, man. Okay.
All right, we're good.
All right, take it easy. See ya.